Before working on your Aventon Ramblas, remove the battery to prevent any electrical charge from running through the bike. Use your key to unlock the battery and remove it. Remove the drive side crank bolt with an 8mm hex wrench, turning it counterclockwise. Thread in the crank puller to the crank arm. Thread in the crank puller until it stops, then begin to turn the inner stud by turning the outer handle clockwise to press the crank off of the spindle. Next, release the tension on the derailleur to remove the chain. Use the Park Tool LRT-2 on the chainring center lock ring. Hold the chainring in place and rotate the lock ring clockwise to loosen. The lock ring is reverse threaded. Once the lock ring is off, the chainring can be removed. Move to the non-drive side and remove the non-drive side crank bolt by turning it clockwise with an 8mm hex key. The non-drive side crank bolt is reverse threaded. To remove the crank arm, repeat the same crank removal steps used for the drive side. Use a Torx T10 wrench to remove the 2 bolts on the motor side cover. Then remove the side cover. Use a 2.5mm hex wrench to remove the 4 bolts for the lower motor cover, then remove the lower cover. Use a Torx T40 wrench to remove the 6 bolts that mount the motor to the frame. Carefully lift the motor from the frame to access the cable connections. Disconnect the main terminal plug by pinching the buckle to release the plug. Then, disconnect the remaining 3 round plugs by gripping the cable end and pulling straight down. Next, use a 6mm hex wrench to unthread and remove the rear wheel through axle. Lock the derailleur in the open position and guide the rear wheel out of the frame while releasing the chain from the cassette. On the non-drive side, use a Torx T10 to remove the 2 bolts on the speed sensor and also the single bolt on the cable retainer plate. Access and disconnect the taillight connections on both sides. Unplug the speed sensor wire. Pull the taillight cables out of the motor opening, leaving the lead wire in the frame for reinstalling the new harness. Next, install the new 3-to-1 wire harness by reconnecting the speed sensor and taillight connections by aligning the arrows and firmly pressing together. Reinstall the cable retaining plate and speed sensor with the original hardware using a Torx T10 wrench. Next, reinstall the rear wheel. With the derailleur in the locked open position, guide the rear wheel back into the frame. Ensure the rotor goes into the brake caliper and the cassette captures the chain. Once the rear wheel is aligned in the frame, reinstall the rear through axle with a small amount of grease and tighten with a 6mm hex wrench. Torque to 12 Newton meters. Now reinstall the motor. Reconnect the corresponding cables. Make sure the colors correspond, the arrows align, and the plugs snap into place. Carefully guide the motor back into the opening in the frame, ensuring no cables are crushed or pinched. Reinstall the 6 motor mounting bolts with a Torx T40. Pre-thread all 6 bolts and then fully tighten each to a torque of 20 to 25 Newton meters. Install the lower motor cover. Use a 2.5mm hex wrench to install the 4 bolts for the cover and torque to 1.5 to 2 Newton meters. Install the side motor cover by using a Torx T10 wrench to reinstall the 2 cover bolts. Torque 0.8 to 1 Newton meter. Next, reinstall the left crank arm. Find your non-drive side crank bolt marked with an L. The bolt is reverse threaded. Tighten by turning the bolt counterclockwise to a torque of 40 Newton meters. Reinstall the chainring lock ring using the Park Tool LRT-2. Apply a small amount of grease to the lock ring threads and thread it on by hand. The lock ring is reverse threaded. Tighten by turning the lock ring counterclockwise. Hold the chainring firmly with your left hand and do not let it rotate. Fully tighten the lock ring to a torque of 30 Newton meters. Install the chain onto the chainring. Reinstall the right crank arm with the remaining crank bolt marked with an R. Ensure to position the crank arm 180 degrees opposite the other crank arm's orientation. Reinstall the crank bolt and tighten it to a torque of 40 Newton meters. Test to ensure the drivetrain is working properly. Reinstall the battery. Insert the battery cover and lock it into place. Power the bike on to confirm all electrical components are functioning. Now, go enjoy the ride on your next Aventon adventure.